In the years preceding the dawn of the 20th century, a form of theatrical entertainment gained widespread popularity among audiences in the United States. Vaudeville featured performers in a variety of acts: magicians, comedians, clowns, and the like. As the invention of motion picture cameras ushered in the age of the cinema, not only would audiences turn their heads to the new attraction, but vaudevillains too. A prominent figure would transition to this new art form with his brilliant virtuosity of the old. One need not scrutinize his films to notice clear traces of vaudeville in them. The prevalence of slapstick, gags, and stunts are in full display. Despite an impressive filmography stretching over 40 years, Keaton's early films in the 1920s, his golden age, are widely regarded as his defining work. New to the industry, how then did Keaton integrate vaudeville into the silver screen? The United States had just emerged victorious from the Great World War. Tragic memories lingered on in the minds of Americans as they entered a new decade. In the age of growing racism, the early years of Prohibition, and the looming threat of a recession, there needed a light-hearted escape from the dullness of the world. Silent slapstick comedy films relied on visual gags rather than dialogues, jokes, or puns. With the popularity of these comedies growing in the formative years of the classical Hollywood cinema in the 1910s, it is no surprise that characteristics of classical narratives can be found in these films. The classical Hollywood cinema, a system that will go on to be recognized as the standard foundation of narrative films, places great emphasis on the narrative causality, ensuring each scene builds upon the previous and develops the narrative to its resolution. David Bordwell asserts that it is the dominant which guarantees the integrity of the structure. Due to cinema's reliance on the vaudeville structure in its early years, vaudeville simultaneously influenced early cinema's forms. It is then apparent that the silent comedy films did in fact exhibit elements of vaudeville. On the contrary, these films were dictated by classical norms that aimed to do away with primitive cinema. When Buster Keaton started making motion pictures, it was his responsibility to unify these two opposing forms in his films, while providing the audience with a spectacular performance, for he acted in the films he directed. His notable adherence to the classical narrative is also Keaton's most prominent theme. There exists at least two lines of action in his features, one driven by romance, a staple characteristic in classical narratives. In his early years as an independent filmmaker, Keaton stayed true to his roots by constructing his films with a gag-dominant structure. Portrayed as an underdog, Keaton works towards his goal of attaining love, undergoing a drastic transformation as he exceeds expectations. In 7 Chances, Keaton must find and marry a bride before the clock strikes 7 to inherit the $7 million his father left him. The status is reversed at the later half, as 700 brides chase after him. As a pampered millionaire and battling butler, upon pursuing a lie, Keaton must prove himself to the family of his love interest. He trains for a boxing championship, taking on the identity of a legendary fighter. His exposure to classical norms, however, may have influenced the structure of his future films, with Keaton placing more emphasis on the narrative further on. Out of all of his features, The General, regarded as his masterpiece, is a prime example of the classicism not only of Buster Keaton, but also of the classical Hollywood cinema as a whole. A period film set in the Confederate state of Georgia in the Civil War, Keaton plays a locomotive engineer who must travel from south to north to rescue his trained general and his love Annabelle, who have been both taken by the Union Army. A supermajority of the film consists of a railroad chase, an appropriate image for the linear structure of the classical narrative. However, it would not do the film justice if its vaudeville characteristics are sidelined. At first glance, the film can be seen as symmetrical. The chase takes a turn at the midpoint of the film, as Keaton manages to rescue the train and Annabelle. The second half then has the Union chasing Keaton from north to south. The symmetry, however, can be further observed at a deeper level. The film contains a plethora of gags established in the first half and then very later on in the second half as a running joke. This characteristic lives in the many films of Keaton. Likewise in Sherlock Jr., gags from the real-life segment are repeated with variations in the dream segment to provide the two seemingly different parts some form of cohesion. Upon a closer analysis of Keaton's gags and stunt sequences, they reveal themselves to surpass the narrative to a considerable extent. Keaton's vaudeville takes the center stage once more, as these gags emphasize his performance rather than the narrative. In The Topper of Our Hospitality, Keaton swings on a rope to save Virginia, his love interest, from a waterfall. Suffice to say, tricks were involved. The waterfall was a built set, and the woman that Keaton saves is a dummy. Despite these, the stunt is wholly genuine. In all of his dangerous sequences, audiences are seeing Keaton himself performing the stunts. Keaton seeks refuge in Steamboat Bill Jr. from the ferocity of the cyclone. At one point, a wall falls on him. Miraculously, he avoids demise, fitting through the window. No special effects were employed. The 2,000-kilogram wall was attached to a hinge, and Keaton had to place himself precisely on the right spot, indicated by a nail driven into the ground. The excess of these sequences are further highlighted by Keaton's use of wide long shots, stemming from the vaudeville tradition of improvisation. With the entire set captured in the confines of the frame, Keaton grants himself ultimate freedom in traversing the space in the shot. Accompanied by these wide frames, Keaton showcases his stunts without cutting, effectively disproving whatever doubts audiences have on his bravado and ingenuity. According to Keaton, close-ups are too jarring on the screen, and this type of cut can stop an audience from laughing. Furthermore, the decision underlines the unpredictability of the vaudeville-like world in Keaton's films. Walter Kerr builds upon this idea, coining the term Keaton curve to describe the neutrality of Keaton's world, bringing him back to where he began. This idea insinuates the existence of a world governed by coincidence. Keaton is pushed around by a sentient universe, conveniently leading him to where he has to be. It is then Keaton's responsibility to interpret the mechanics of the world to achieve his goal or escape dangerous situations. The impressive juggling act that is Keaton's balancing of vaudeville and classical narratives, a coexistence of sorts in his films embodying the best of both worlds, remain a testament to his ingenuity as both an entertainer and a visionary filmmaker. It showcases Keaton's innovation, optimizing a fading art form for the silver screen. Much adored for his fearlessness, comedic performances, and technical expertise, Keaton provides a genuine experience devoid of trickery. In the realm of comedy, he knows what lands and what falls flat, a sense Shirley had worked for years to develop. Behind the great stone face is an intelligent master constantly perfecting his craft and besting himself at every given opportunity. A valuable trait not only filmmakers can benefit from to hone their skills for life. There is no question as to why, years after the creation of his finest crafts, future filmmakers who come after Buster Keaton still look back at the pioneer for inspiration.